Welcome to today's Explainer. We are diving into a truly fascinating, honestly kind of wild piece of source material today. We're looking at a text called The Next Frontier, and it has a highly unusual premise. Set right around June 26, 2010, this text presents itself as a purported spiritual dialogue with the father of modern management himself, Peter F. Drucker. Now, what's the goal of this dialogue? Well, it's to offer a sweeping, really sharp critique of Japan's political and economic landscape at that time, specifically taking aim at the policies of the Khan administration. And honestly, whether you look at this as a literal spiritual channeling or just a very unique literary framing device, the arguments it lays out are incredibly bold and absolutely demand our attention.
Just looking at the table of contents, you can instantly see how directly this text goes after the policies of the day. It uses this channeled perspective of Drucker to issue a really stern warning against easy tax hikes, actually calling them an infringement on property rights. From there, it makes this hard pivot toward the absolute necessity of nurturing future industries. So it's this comprehensive roadmap, half critique, half proposed solutions, all delivered through the lens of a legendary management icon.
To make sense of this wide-ranging dialogue, we've broken it down into three main acts. First, the economic critique. Second, the national strategy. And finally, a management masterclass. All right, let's jump right into Act 1, the economic critique, and specifically, this massive warning against the consumption tax. So, to set the stage, back in 2010, the Japanese government under the Khan administration was seriously looking at raising the consumption tax to deal with their economic problems. This text takes a completely hardline stance against that approach, offering a stark philosophical warning. The argument here is that easy tax hikes aren't just bad economics, they're fundamentally a coercive force. The text actually frames taxation as a direct infringement on the fundamental property rights of the citizens. It really challenges the morality of a government just casually dipping into the public's pockets without first exhausting every other avenue for efficiency and growth. To really hammer this point home, the author uses this striking extreme hypothetical. The text states, if you make the tax rate 100%, citizens will all die. Tax has that much coercive power. By scaling the idea all the way up to 100%, the author wants us to vividly realize that taxation isn't just, numbers on a spreadsheet. It's the state literally exercising the power of life and death, freedom and restriction over its people. Treating it casually, the text argues, is a very dangerous path. So what practically happens if a government ignores that warning? The source maps out a very clear, highly destructive sequence, what it calls a vicious cycle. Step 1. The government implements that easy consumption tax hike. Step 2. This immediately suppresses consumption, resulting in lower purchasing power. People simply stop buying things. And Step 3. That drop in demand triggers a vicious cycle of recession and unemployment. The takeaway here is that instead of saving the economy, a tax hike crushes the very engine of growth, leaving the entire nation worse off than before.
Okay, moving on to Act 2, the national strategy, specifically investing in the next frontier.
If raising taxes is the wrong move, what's the right one? Well, the text insists a nation absolutely must invest boldly in the future. And central to this strategy is this concept of future industries. The source explicitly defines these as sectors like aerospace and space exploration. But here's the really key distinction. You can't evaluate these as short-term business ventures. They require a massive state-level vision. The whole goal of investing in future industries is to actively elevate human civilization to its next stage, completely moving away from a mindset that only cares about immediate quarterly profits. And this civilizational vision inherently ties into a global context. The dialogue argues that an advanced nation like Japan actually has a responsibility to the world. The point here is that wealthy, advanced nations can't afford to just play it safe domestically or try to survive by just making their products a little cheaper. They have a duty to pioneer these future economies. They need to lead the way in technological advancement and act as a literal engine for global progress. Now, you might be wondering, okay, but aerospace, space exploration, that sounds unbelievably expensive. Well, the text addresses that head-on by citing a truly staggering figure, 1.4 to 1.5 quadrillion yen. That was the estimated national wealth, the financial assets held by citizens in Japan at the time. So the crucial argument here is that the problem isn't a lack of money. The money is literally sitting right there. The problem, according to this dialogue, is a complete lack of a grand national strategy on how to effectively mobilize and invest that massive wealth for the future. And the ultimate manifestation of that grand strategy? Space development. The source argues that when a state invests in spacecraft, they shouldn't be asking, how much profit will this make next year? That is entirely the wrong lens. Instead, state investment in space is about achieving the absolute highest technological standards available to humanity. By reaching for those extreme heights, a nation subsequently pulls all of its other domestic industries upward along with it, allowing it to lead the world both economically and technologically.
Which brings us to our third and final section, the Management Masterclass. Let's talk about empowering the individual.
To actually pull off these massive national goals, you need organizations that function well on a micro level. The text draws a really vivid contrast between two styles of management to illustrate this. On one side, you have the outdated vertical or army-style organization. Think rigid, top-down, strictly following orders from the hierarchy. It's great if you need to move massive groups of people uniformly, but it is terrible for innovation. On the flip side is what the text fiercely advocates for, the soccer or orchestra style. This is all about dynamic teamwork where specialized individual strengths are harmonized to achieve a unified goal.
The source points out that politics, and honestly a lot of traditional organizations, often default to that rigid army style. But modern challenges require a soccer team approach, or an orchestra approach. Think about a soccer match. Yes, players have assigned positions, but the game is incredibly fluid. A defender might suddenly need to attack, a forward might need to drop back and defend. It's exactly like musicians in an orchestra harmonizing their unique instruments. The team has to dynamically adapt to this situation in real time, relying on the unique skills of each player, instead of just waiting around for a rigid order from the boss.
So, how do you actually cultivate that kind of flexible management? Well, the purported spirit of Drucker offers some highly actionable advice, particularly aimed at the younger generations who are going to be leading the future. First up, organizations have to promote based on merit and capability. You've got to boldly discard those strict seniority systems. Second, leaders must actively listen to the ideas of younger members. Having a listening ear is absolutely vital. Third, individuals need to put in the mental work to overcome internal jealousy within the team. And finally, the ultimate goal is to maximize everyone's unique shining points, even if they seem totally average in other areas. And this leads us to the absolute core message of the entire management section. The text states that the true nature of management is simply this: finding and utilizing the greatest strengths of individuals. If you try to make everyone on your team perfectly well-rounded and average, the overall power of the organization actually drops. True management is identifying exactly where a person shines the brightest and deploying them specifically in that role.
We have covered a ton of ground today, from a highly unique critique of economic stagnation and tax hikes to a bold call for civilizational investment in space to a masterclass in dynamic, strengths-based management. The insights from this purported dialogue with Peter Drucker really challenge us to think so much bigger than our immediate circumstances. So I want to leave you with this to ponder. How can you move away from rigid hierarchies and apply that soccer-style management to your own teams? And looking at the world right now, what are the bold future frontiers that our societies desperately need to be investing in today? Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep exploring.